Hello and welcome to ACCA F6 UK taxation. In the last lesson, we looked at the taxation in the UK specifically and some of the administration point of view. Some of the points I missed in the last lesson, we will cover in this lesson before we move to our first major topic, which is income tax. Now, income tax, as I spoke to you in the first lesson, is a major topic and it's very, very huge. I listed down all the topics which we are going to study in our ACCA F6 taxation syllabus. So first of which was income tax. That's what we are going to look at today. But before we move to our taxation, income tax of course, I hope that you would appreciate the fact that no one, although the government wants the taxation, but no one is happy paying the tax. Say for example, if you are earning £100,000, you will have to pay about £30,000 taxation. So you won't be happy to pay £30,000 in taxation. Likewise, if you're earning say £30,000, then still you will have to pay about £600-700 of taxation. So no one is happy in paying taxation. Say for example, government says that you don't have to pay tax at all, then everybody going to be very, very happy. However, the government did not say that you don't have to pay tax, but government did said that there are some ways in which you can save taxation. Now you will have to go to chartered accountants, so that's why we are made. So the clients come to us so that we can advise them to save taxation in a legal way. Now the taxation overall could be avoided in two ways. So one is a legal way, and of course you would appreciate the second way is an illegal way. Now we will look at the avoidance of tax today. Now first of all, as I said, there are two ways in which you can avoid the taxation. First of all, which is called avoidance. Now avoidance is a term which is specifically used if you are going to avoid the tax in a legal way. Say for example, you are using the reliefs, you are using the exemptions, you are using the different ways which are allowed by HMRC itself, so that you can use them ways and you can reduce tax in a legal way, right? So that is the way by which you can reduce your tax liabilities, so that at the end of the day you will have to pay less taxation. But of course, that's why chartered accountants and tax advisors and tax inspectors are made, so that the clients can go to them and take the relevant advices according to their own scenarios. Right? So that is a legal way to avoid taxation, to pay less tax by using the reliefs and allowances and other very technical things as well. Right? Another way to pay less tax, right? Another way to pay less tax, but in illegal way, is called evasion. Now, tax avoidance and tax evasion, they are two different terms. As I said, I explained earlier, tax avoidance is a legal way to pay less tax, whereas tax evasion is a term used specifically if you are trying to play up with the rules and you are trying to launder the money. So there are illegal ways to avoid tax or to pay less tax, right? So these are two terms specifically used if you are planning to pay less tax. But of course, you should, you can avoid tax, but you can't evade tax. All right? Now, although that tax avoidance is allowed by HMRC, they say that you can use the rules to avoid the tax in a legal way, but there is an exception, right? HMRC is looking at you while you are avoiding the tax. They will keep looking at your transaction, at your tax returns, your affairs of taxation, so that in order to see that how much tax you are avoiding, why are you avoiding it, are you continuously doing it, are you getting major reliefs out of it, are you just making up the figures so that the figures look like that they are real but they are not real, you are just making up the figures to avoid taxation. So if it is that way and it is a legal way, then HMRC won't be happy even if it is legal. Right? So that's why tax avoidance especially, although it is legal, but it is very, very difficult to define that that if it is allowed by HMRC or not. Although it is legal, but if you are continuously doing it, if you are saving millions of pounds in taxation, then that definitely government won't be happy, HMRC won't be happy, right? So there is a thing called GAAR. GAAR. So what is that? It is General Anti-Abuse Rule. So why they have introduced this one, General Anti-Abuse Rule. Now the reason behind this GAAR is that when you are avoiding the tax in a legal way, you're doing the tax avoidance, you're using reliefs, you're using the exemption and stuff like that, but HMRC will be looking at you. So they will be using the GAAR things, so that this is a General Anti-Abuse Rule. They will look at your transactions by GAAR rules, so that you cannot avoid tax even if it is legal. But if you're trying to take much out of the taxation, you're trying to save millions of pounds in taxation, and you are continuously doing it, if they look at your tax returns, you are saving millions of pounds every year in taxation. So obviously government won't be happy, right? Excuse me. So that's why the GAAR is introduced, so that you cannot avoid tax, you cannot basically avoid much of taxation, right? So that is the way, and there are two terms, tax avoidance and tax evasion. But if you are avoiding the tax in a legal way, please remember that HMRC will be looking at you with the help of GAAR rules, which are generally anti-abuse rules, general anti-abuse rules, right? Now, of course, that as I said earlier, even the clients want to avoid tax, they can't avoid themselves. They need help, because they don't know what personal allowance is, what you can say, how to avoid tax. They don't know the personal allowance exemption rate. They don't know the other stuff as well. I will tell you later, but for now, if I tell you the stuff, you might not know what these are. Say, for example, personal allowance, you might not know it yet. But to be precise, a layman, a person, say for example a doctor or a lawyer, they don't know how to avoid tax because they're not tax experts. So that's why we are made. That's why tax advisors and chartered accountants are made, so that they can go to chartered accountants to find the legal way allowed by HMRC to avoid tax or to pay less tax by using the reliefs and exemptions and tax planning, right? So even if they want to avoid tax, they need our help, right? So what if a person is coming to you, right, and you have to use your own judgment? If you remember from your earlier studies, you have studied ACCA's Code of Ethics, if you remember. So what was that? The Code of Ethics, there were a few rules: integrity, confidentiality, professional competence, and due care, and all that. There were quite many. About 5 to 6 rules, right? So why were they made? So they were not only relevant if you've studied audit, for example. They were not relevant for just audit. They were relevant for audit and taxation and accountant as a whole. Even if you're working in a consultancy, or you are working for taxation, or even you are working in an audit department. So they are relevant everywhere, right? So that's why even a client comes into your office and say, I want to avoid tax, but in a legal way. While considering that, you have to see the intention of the client, right? What is the intention of the client? Why they want to avoid tax? Are they playing up with the rules? Are they doing it continuously, or what? So you will have to use your own judgment, right? So that's why, in the questions, something called professional ethics will come. So what does your profession tells you to do? Professional, we can say, judgment. And ethics is part of this, right? So professional judgment. So you will have to do professional judgment, and you will have to consider the ethical rules which you have already studied at other papers. Say for example, you have seen almost in every paper. You have passed, I assume you have passed F1 paper, and in that as well you have seen ethics rules, rule of code of ethics you have already seen. So you will have to consider, and you will have to keep in mind the code of ethics while advising your clients, So say for example, if someone comes into your office and say that I haven't submitted my tax returns last year and I don't want to show it because HMRC didn't know it yet, so what would you do then? So of course you can't advise them that just be silent, don't let HMRC know that. Of course you can't do that, all right, because it is not allowed by your profession. Excuse me. If you're doing it, say for example, if you're advising the client like this, then you are breaching the basic principle of code of ethics. You are breaching not only the code of ethics, but you are also defaming ACCA. So for example, if you do that and you found guilty, you could face a huge penalty. It could lead to a lifetime imprisonment, right? So be careful and always consider while you're advising your clients, especially for taxation, that what is the intention of your client, because even if you're advising them legally, their intention could be to avoid millions of pounds in taxation, but they could be playing up with the rules, right? So what you have to do is you will have to see what is their intention, what they have done before, if they have avoided the taxation before, if they have, and how much they have avoided, right? Then say for example, if a client, after inquiring some inquiries from the client, what you have concluded is that client is not only playing up with the rules, but is thinking to launder the money as well, and he is seeking your advice to help him launder the money out of the country or somewhere else, right? What you can do then? What you have to do is, in that case, you will have to inform your own within your own firm if there is a money laundering officer, right? So you will have to inform money laundering officer, right? MLO or money laundering officer. Now, what are money laundering officers? They are special force within your own firms, especially in the big firms. If you are working in a small firm, then there won't be any money laundering officers. But if you're working in a big firm, then definitely these guys will be there to help you. So if you suspect that a client is going to launder the money and is either seeking your help, or even if he is not seeking your help, still he is looking for money laundering, then still you need to inform money laundering officers within your firm. Say for example, if you're working for a small company, in that case as well, even if there isn't any money laundering officer, there will be National Crime Agency as well. So what you can do is you can go to National Crime Agency or NCA within the UK. So you will have to write down or even ring them to tell them that this specific client is looking to launder the money. However, you have studied one of the code of ethics was confidentiality, if you remember. What confidentiality said, if you remember, that you have to keep the secrets of your client. You can't share it with other clients or even with the authorities, say for example HMRC. Now in that case, say for example, you were I'll give you an example, and I'll explain in an example. Say for example, you were working for a client and you have been working for quite long, right? So after some time the client was going to launder the money, or he was trying to avoid the taxation, huge amount of taxation. Then what you thought is that you can't represent him anymore because he's playing up with the rules and he is not he hasn't got any intention to pay taxation properly. So what you should do in that case is you must cease to act for that client. You can't act for that client anymore because his intentions are not good, right? Because he's trying to play up with the rules and he's trying to avoid the taxation and all that, right? So if he is doing that, then you must cease to act for that client. Now, although you will cease to act for the client, but the confidentiality says that you cannot share the secrets of your client. So what you will have to do is you will have to write to HMRC that we cannot represent this client, and we are no longer representing this client. Although we have been, but we are no longer representing this client. Although we are not representing this client, but we will not be able to tell you the reasons behind it. So we cannot tell you the reasons. That's what you have to write to HMRC. The question might pop into your question paper saying that a client is doing money laundering is trying to avoid tax, or he hasn't submitted a tax return, so he's seeking your advice and he's saying that what shall we do? Shall we keep our secret or not? Because I don't want to submit a tax return because I haven't heard from HMRC. They don't know it anyway. Why shall I bother submitting a new tax return, right? So in that case, you will have to write to HMRC that, first you have to do is, first you will have to advise your client so that if you can resolve, if you can make him agree to disclose to HMRC whatever the tax liabilities are, you will advise your client that please do not do it, it is not legal. And you will also tell them the penalties and consequences of that. So if you can agree him, that's fine. If you cannot agree him, you must write to HMRC that we are no longer representing that client, but we cannot tell you the reasons behind it, right? So you cannot tell them the reasons behind it, but HMRC people are not kids, right? They know each and every bit, so they will know what could be the reasons behind it. So they might, feel suspicious if you are no longer representing a client, especially if you have a long-term relationship, right? Now, in the cases where the MLO is involved, say for example, a client is trying to launder the money. So if the client is trying to launder the money and he's trying to move the money from one country to another, and it's a huge amount, right? What you will have to do is you will have to be careful, right? How careful? Because in that circumstances, if you cease to act for that client, say for example, first of all, what you will do is you will go to client and you will say, please don't do it because it is not legal. I cannot help you anyway, so please do not do it. But that client won't be agreed straight away, obviously, because he will be thinking about a huge lot, right? So he won't be agreed straight away. Now in that case, what you can do is, one option is just say, I am no longer representing you, and I will inform HMRC that I am no longer representing you. All right? Now, if you do that, the client might feel suspicious that you know what he is doing, and the client might feel suspicious and he will no longer continue doing that. Right? So that thing is called tipping off. If we write it down just here, tip off or tipping off. Now tip off is simply, you can say it is an indication. So say for example, if you make your client realize that you are going to inform HMRC, or if you make your client realize that you know what he is doing, right? So that thing is called, that thing is called tip off. So tip off is simply, say for example, if the client is playing up with the rules, and you are saying to him, I won't tell HMRC, I won't tell money laundering officers, don't worry about it, but I am no longer representing you. If you do that, then client will be thinking he is being nice in front of me, but when I go out of office, he might ring money laundering officer. So that thing is called tipping off. You must not tip off your client. You must not make your client realize that you are going to inform money laundering officer, and that is very, very difficult thing to do, especially when you are dealing with big lot of amounts, especially when it is involved the money laundering thing, because you have to cease acting for that client, but you have to pretend that you are you are acting for him, you are representing him, right? So that is very, very difficult thing to do, but you must not tip off your client. You must not make them realize that you are going to inform a National Crime Agency or money laundering officer, right? So these are the topics that we have seen today. Professional ethics or professional judgment. What we have to do is we have to be careful with the scenarios where money laundering things are involved, where the client is playing up with the rules and all that. What you can do, we have seen today. And tax avoidance and evasion, difference between them. One is avoidance is legal and tax evasion is illegal. And GAAR, general anti-abuse rules, even if you are avoiding the tax in a legal way, still HMRC will be looking at you and they will use the GAAR things. And finally, tip off. You must not tip off your client even if you are going to inform money laundering officer, right? So that is end of this lecture. In the next lecture, we will continue our lesson with the income tax, which is our first topic. Till then, goodbye and thank you.